The fourth edition of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix concluded successfully last weekend at the iconic Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Edino Ferrari circuit. Last year's event was cancelled due to bad weather conditions that prevailed in the region, causing extreme flooding. Anyhow, no effect from rain this year, and dry weather conditions were experienced throughout the weekend. This was the first European F1 event of the 2024 calendar, and it was able to stage a great F1 race with some tight battles at the top. Welcome back to Total F1. This is our race report of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. But before we proceed, hit the subscribe button and smash the bell icon for more exciting updates. FP1 was a really tight session for most of the drivers, as the majority failed to keep their cars inside the track limits, as they didn't feel comfortable with the grip conditions of the surface of Imola. Carlos Sainz cut the chicane at turn 14 after failing to slow down his car properly. Even the championship leader went off the road at some point, and he had to use all of his skills to save his RB20 from a full spin. Once again, he had a run through the gravel trap at turn 12, scraping the floor of his car. Drivers like Piastri, Sargent, Tsunoda and Ricciardo experienced problems with grip levels at turn 17. All of them were lucky to rejoin the track without any major incident, except Ricciardo, who had a full run across the gravel trap. Mercedes drivers also struggled, and Hamilton was the one who experienced a full spin at turn 12. Alexander Albon had to park his car by the side of the track after losing power. Both Alpine and Kick Sauber teams struggled with an unexpected bouncing in their cars. Kevin Magnussen sat out of FP1, allowing Oliver Bearman to take the wheel of his Haas Challenger, and he completed the session as 15th fastest of the session. At the end of FP1, Leclerc was the fastest, and he was followed by Russell and Sainz. Charles Leclerc was once again top of the timesheets in FP2, giving hope to Tifosi about a competitive home race. Lewis Hamilton was subjected to criticism by both Alonso and Verstappen after being obstructed by the British driver. Both the McLaren drivers delivered some hot laps, catching the attention of top rivals like Red Bull and Ferrari, as they were able to record a victory at the last race in Miami as well. Compared to FP1, the majority of drivers adjusted well to the grip conditions at Imola. However, the Alpine driver Pierre Gasly experienced a big spin at the exit of turn 15. Carlos Sainz repeated the same mistake in FP1 by cutting the chicane at turn 14. At the end of the session, Leclerc, Piastri and Tsunoda held the top 3 spots of the timesheets. The final practice session started with Fernando Alonso's big crash into the barriers after losing the rear of his car, which was sufficient enough to red flag the session. This was a big blow to the plans of the Silverstone-based team, who came with better upgrade packages ahead of the race in Imola. Sergio Perez was the other driver who found a barrier after experiencing a ride through the gravel trap. During this last opportunity to test the optimum performances of their cars, both the McLaren drivers appeared to be top of the timesheets with a much better pace at a certain moment of the session. Charles Leclerc, who topped the timesheets during the previous 2 sessions, once again delivered some fast laps with his heavily upgraded SF24 package. Both the Mercedes appeared to be performing comfortably with their W15 car, thanks to the Imola upgrade package. Anyhow, Red Bull drivers were still dealing with lesser grid conditions in the middle part of the layout. Alpine, who struggled a lot on Friday, appeared to have solved their issues to a certain extent. At the end of the session, McLaren and Ferrari drivers occupied the top spots of the timesheets, giving some hopes of beating Max Verstappen once again. At the early part of qualifying, Fernando Alonso made a mistake once again like in FP3, but this time he was lucky to save his car from the barriers after having a double run through the gravel. So, that was the end of qualifying in Imola for the 2-time world champion, and he was disqualified alongside with Logan Sargent, who didn't take part in the qualifying session. 2 Sauber drivers and Kevin Magnussen also joined that group, which was eliminated at the end of Q1. When Verstappen topped the timesheets in Q2, his teammate Sergio Perez faced the risk of being eliminated. It was mandatory for Perez to improve his lap time in his final attempt, and Daniel Ricciardo was the driver at risk of being eliminated if he improved his lap time. The Mexican was able to improve his lap time, but it was not sufficient enough to change his position in the standings, so he was eliminated alongside with Ocon, Stroll, Albon and Gasly at the end of Q2. During Q3 of the qualifying, McLaren and Ferrari drivers did their best to beat Verstappen to the pole, but none of those attempts were strong enough to pass the lap time set by the Dutchman. In his final attempt, he further improved his lap time, cementing the pole position. Lando Norris stayed as the second fastest driver of the session, till his teammate Oscar Piastri completed a very fast lap in his final attempt, which was only 700th of a second slower than the pole sitter Max Verstappen. That means Verstappen, 2 McLaren drivers and Ferrari drivers occupied the top 5 spots of the starting grid of the main race on Sunday. Behind these 5, Russell, Tsunoda, Hamilton, Ricciardo and Hülkenberg occupied the positions in the starting grid respectively. However, a little change to the starting grid was introduced as Piastri was handed over a 3-place grid penalty as he was found to be guilty of obstructing Magnussen during the qualifying session. That means Piastri dropped to the 5th spot of the starting grid, moving Norris, Leclerc and Sainz 1 spot to the front. The race started only with 19 cars on the grid, as Fernando Alonso decided to start the race from the pit lane after some late changes to his car with the difficulties that he experienced throughout the weekend. The majority of the field decided to start with mediums, except a few drivers. Alonso and Gasly decided to start on mediums, and Perez, Sargent and Zhou preferred to go with hards. At the start of the race, Lando Norris was able to put some pressure on Max Verstappen by moving very closely to him, but Max was able to develop a considerable gap with the rest of the grid within the next few seconds of the race as usual. Meanwhile, at the middle of the pack, Sergio Perez started his recovery drive by beating Ricciardo. Hülkenberg's initial launch was really good, as he was able to improve his position up to 8th by beating Tsunoda and Ricciardo. Alexander Albon suddenly slowed down his car on lap 9 as the Thai driver experienced a problem after an error while pitting his new tyres. There was a battle between Tsunoda and Hülkenberg to take an advantage through the pit stop. However, Tsunoda, who pitted 1 lap earlier, emerged as the winner of that little battle in the middle part of the pack. Sergio Perez, who was experiencing a bad race weekend, faced more problems when he went off the road, experiencing a ride over a gravel trap on lap 17. This had resulted to reduce his performance by a considerable extent. Further, Stroll was able to use this as an opportunity to close down the gap with the Mexican. On lap 26, the 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton locked up and experienced a ride through the gravel trap close to Aqua Minerale, but he was lucky to rejoin the race without any major damages. On lap 27, both Tsunoda and Hülkenberg overtook Sargent into 12th and 13th spot respectively on a brief time interval. Then, several drivers made their pit stops, especially including the race leader, Max Verstappen. This resulted to change the track position within a brief time interval too. However, Sergio Perez, who started the race on hards, managed his tyres till lap number 38, attaching firmly to his one-stop strategy. And after setting a fresher set of medium tyres, he started his chase again. Ricciardo and Hülkenberg became the first victims as the Mexican got the full use of a DRS available. Then the Mexican focused fully on chasing down Yuki Tsunoda, who was running as P8 at that moment. Meanwhile, a fierce battle was developed in the tail of the pack between Magnussen and Zhou for the 16th spot of the race. Lando's second spot came under the threat of Ferrari when Leclerc was able to close down the gap to under a second. After chasing down for around 5 laps, Sergio Perez finally claimed the 8th spot by making an overtake against Yuki Tsunoda. Stroll was the other one who was looking to improve his position like Perez, as he was the only Aston Martin driver who had the opportunity to score any points after the misfortune of Alonso at Imola continued. He easily overtook Hülkenberg and started chasing down Tsunoda, who was occupying the 9th spot of the race. On lap 47, Charles Leclerc took a straight path by going off the road after missing turns 14 and 15, but luckily he didn't cause any damage to his challenger or his track position. Meanwhile, in the middle of the pack, Kevin Magnussen, who was trying to improve his position, overtook Esteban Ocon into P14. Stroll, who was chasing down Tsunoda over several laps, completed his move on lap 50 without experiencing any strong defense from the VCA RB driver. When there were 12 more laps to go, Verstappen complained about having an issue with his tyres, as they appeared to be suffering. This helped the McLaren driver reduce the gap with the Dutchman down to just 4 seconds, and it was further dropped down to 2 seconds when there were 7 laps to go. Norris tried his best to close the gap with Verstappen during the remaining laps, and at a certain moment, there was only 1.5 second gap between the two drivers. But, same as Verstappen, Lando also experienced issues with his aging tyres, as they didn't provide the necessary grip to complete that chase. So, this created the opportunity for Verstappen to complete the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix with a victory at the end of 63 laps. He was just 0.725 seconds ahead of the McLaren driver when he crossed the finish line. With that battle between the two drivers for the victory, Formula 1 fans were able to witness a great F1 race at the end of that day. Behind Verstappen and Norris, Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc crossed the line, occupying the remaining podium spot of the race. His teammate Carlos Sainz finished the race as 5th, sandwiching Piastri into the 4th spot. Mercedes pair Hamilton and Russell lonely crossed the line as 6th and 7th, without experiencing any considerable attack from the rival drivers. Sergio Perez, who tried his best to improve his track position after starting the race as P11, had to be satisfied with an 8th place finish. The last 2 point-offering spots were occupied by Stroll and Tsunoda, respectively. Haas drivers, who were consistently among points over the last few races, missed the opportunity of scoring points this time, as Hülkenberg and Magnussen crossed the line as 11th and 12th. And in that way, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix concluded successfully, staging a great F1 race that really challenged the dominance of Red Bull, which is maintaining over the last few seasons. That is the end of our race report for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel to get more exciting Formula 1 news. We'll see you in the next video, guys. Goodbye.